Bethesda are one of the biggest publishers in the gaming industry, and as most big publishers do, they've released a few games during the 2020s decade so far. And since the last time I did a ranking went down so well, I thought it'd be a fun idea to rank all 7 Bethesda published games so far this decade. Before we start, if you do end up enjoying the video, please make sure to subscribe as we're looking to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, but with that out the way, let's get started. Surprising nobody, we're starting with Redfall, a game that unfortunately is remembered more for its failures than its potential. Developed by Arcane, Redfall set its sights on combining the immersive sim gameplay that Arcane are known for with a cooperative multiplayer experience. On paper, the concept could have worked. A small open world town overrun by vampires, with you tasked with pushing back the darkness through exploration, combat and teamwork, that doesn't sound awful, but the execution left much to be desired. The problems started at launch. Redfall released in a very rough state, plagued by bugs, lackluster AI, and a host of other technical issues. Its world design felt oddly empty and lifeless. Towns and buildings that should have brimmed with tension or narrative depth were often shallow and unengaging, which was a stark departure from any of Arcane's previous work. One of the biggest pitfalls of Redfall was its gameplay loop. Combat lacked the satisfying feedback and variety that we've come to expect from Arcane. Enemies were often really predictable and easy to outmaneuver, reducing encounters to repetitive chores rather than thrilling challenges. Another glaring issue was the storytelling. While the game attempted to set up an intriguing narrative, the story unfolded through bland environmental storytelling and uninspired dialogue sequences. The cast of playable characters had some fun powers, but their personalities and backstories were really underdeveloped, making it hard to connect with any of them. What makes Redfall such a disappointment isn't just its flaws, but the fact that it came from Arcane, a studio renowned for groundbreaking games like Dishonored and Prey. I went into Redfall hoping for a level of innovation and polish that simply wasn't there. Instead, we got a game that felt rushed and uninspired, as if it had been forced to pivot towards a live service model without clear vision. Redfall stands as a cautionary tale about the risks of chasing trends rather than playing to a studio's strengths. Coming in at number 6 is Ghostwire Tokyo, a game that did showcase some of the most visually stunning and atmospherically rich environments of the 2020s. Developed by Tango, this action-adventure title brought us to a haunting yet eerily beautiful version of Tokyo, a city suddenly devoid of its human population and teeming with malevolent spirits. With its unique premise and supernatural themes, Ghostwire Tokyo stood out as one of the more experimental titles in Bethesda's catalogue. However, despite its creativity, it fell short of fully delivering on its premise. The heart of Ghostwire Tokyo lies in the setting. Tango crafted a really nice, detailed rendition of Tokyo, blending iconic landmarks with supernatural elements. Walking through rain-slicked streets illuminated by neon lights, it feels great. You can really soak in the atmosphere that felt both magical and unnerving. The game's use of Japanese folklore gave it a distinct cultural identity, but while the world was rich in detail, the gameplay did not match this creativity. Combat in Ghostwire revolves around using ethereal weaving, a system where you fire off elemental attacks like wind, water and fire, using hand gestures that feel ripped straight out of a supernatural martial arts film. While initially flashy and fun, combat quickly becomes extremely repetitive. Enemies often fall into predictable patterns, and the limited variety of attacks and strategies means that encounters lose their excitement over time. You spend most of your time in combat walking away from the enemy, and it's far too passive. Even the more powerful attacks and upgrades don't do enough to shake up the formula. Exploration seems cool at first because the setting is so cool, but this also begins to feel shallow as the game progresses. The side quests rarely delve deeper into rich folklore, although they sometimes do, and that is when the game shines best. It all feels like a missed opportunity to immerse yourself in the supernatural themes and mysteries that make the setting so compelling, or for it to just be wasted by a Ubisoft-style world. The story centres on a young man possessed by a ghostly detective, and they work together to stop a masked villain. It's very generic, it never deviates from this. The premise is intriguing at first, the narrative feels extremely uneven though. The personal journey to save your sister provides some emotional weight, but it's hard to care too much. Ghostwire Tokyo is a game of contradictions. On one hand, it excels in crafting an unforgettable atmosphere, a visually striking world, and a unique premise rooted in Japanese culture. On the other hand, its gameplay and storytelling failed to fully capitalise on the foundation laid before them. You're left with a game that feels more like a collection of great ideas than a cohesive experience. At number 5 we have Deathloop, and this may be controversial, but hear me out. Deathloop is a game built on paradoxes. It's both linear and non-linear. fast-paced yet methodical, and wildly inventive yet occasionally constrained by its own core premise. While it earned widespread critical acclaim for its bold approach, I don't think this game was as good as the media made it out to be. The premise is immediately intriguing. You play as Colt, a man trapped on the island of Blackreef, where a time loop resets the day every time he dies. Colt's goal is to break the loop by assassinating 8 visionaries across the island, all within a single in-game day. The catch is that the loop resets if you fail, and every action you take has a ripple effect that will shape the events of the next loop. What sets Deathloop apart is its gameplay. It's essentially a murder puzzle where you must figure out how to manipulate events and gather intel to set up the perfect chain of assassinations. Arkane's signature approach to level design really does shine here. Blackreef is divided into 4 districts, each of which can be explored at 4 different times of day: morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. The world shifts dynamically depending on the time, with new opportunities, enemies, and environmental changes waiting to be discovered. Combat and movement also feels pretty engaging. You have a mix of brutal firearms and supernatural powers, but the standout mechanic though is the multiplayer feature, where another player, or an AI if you so wish, can invade your game as Juliana, a rival assassin tasked with hunting down Colt. These invasions inject unpredictability and tension into an otherwise calculated experience. But while Deathloop does excel in its own creativity, it stumbles in its pacing and repetition. The concept of playing the same day over and over again is thematically brilliant, but it can grow tedious as you get used to all the areas, although they do change depending on the time of day. Speaking of the story, Deathloop walks a fine line between intriguing and underwhelming. The chemistry between Colt and Juliana is brought to life through stellar voice performances, and it is a real highlight. Their witty banter adds a lot of charm and personality to the game. However, the overarching narrative, particularly the conclusion, left me wanting more. The final revelations about the loop and the characters' relationships don't quite deliver the emotional payoff that I was hoping for. It's also worth noting that I did play this game at launch, and the enemy AI was atrocious then. I have heard that this has been improved, but I can only base this off the version of the game I played, and the version of the game I played had horrendous AI. That said, Deathloop is undeniably a bold and refreshing entry in Bethesda's catalogue. It is ultimately a game that swings for the fences, and while it doesn't hit a home run, it's impossible not to admire its ambition. For those willing to dive into its intricate mechanics and embrace the trial and error gameplay, Deathloop offers an experience unlike many other games in recent memory. It may not be Arkane's most universally beloved game, and I think it's far from their best, but it's a testament to their willingness to innovate and challenge you in new ways. Coming in at number 4 is Starfield, Bethesda's highly anticipated dive into space exploration. Starfield carried massive expectations, and while it didn't completely redefine the RPG or sci-fi genres, it did deliver an expansive, detailed and ambitious galaxy for you to explore. With Starfield, Bethesda sought to bring their signature style of open-world role-playing into the vastness of space, and the results were polarising. At its core, Starfield is about exploration. You take on the role of a customizable protagonist who joins Constellation, a group of space explorers in search of answers to humanity's greatest mysteries. The game offers a bunch of planets to visit spread across numerous star systems, and while not all of these locations are handcrafted, Starfield achieves a sense of scale that few games can rival. The act of stepping out onto a barren planet is awe-inspiring at times, especially for those who've dreamed of exploring the cosmos. With that said, the sheer scale of the game is both its greatest strength and its biggest drawback. There are specific areas of the game, such as Aquila City, which are much more engaging, but they only make up a small fraction of the game's overall map, which is filled by a lot of empty planets. The main storyline is a mix of cosmic mystery and grounded human drama, as you unravel the secrets of mysterious alien artifacts. While it's serviceable and occasionally intriguing, the narrative doesn't reach the emotional heights of some of Bethesda's past work. Instead, Starfield thrives in its side content. The game features numerous factions, and joining and working with these factions often provides some of the most memorable moments, as you are given the freedom to shape your allegiances and carve out your role in the galaxy. Combat and customization are other areas where Starfield does excel. On-foot combat feels tighter and more refined than in any of Bethesda's previous games, with a satisfying mix of ballistic, energy and melee weapons. But for all its strengths, Starfield isn't without flaws. The game's reliance on menus and fast travel really detracts from the immersion, as you're just constantly navigating loading screens and it really does take you out of it. While Bethesda has always leaned on a modular quest design, Starfield struggles sometimes with its pacing, as the gaps between meaningful content often feel too long. and while I mentioned earlier that the main cities are vibrant and full of life, NPC interactions and quest design do feel quite dated. Visually, Starfield does look quite nice in places and uneven in others, but in the end, Starfield is a game that offers you a massive sandbox to lose yourself in. It's not a revolutionary leap for Bethesda, and I do think it fell short of expectations, but it's a refinement of their strengths on an unprecedented scale. For those who love Bethesda's signature approach to world building and exploration, Starfield does deliver countless hours of adventure. However, its scope and reliance on procedural generation mean that it's not as tightly crafted as some of their previous masterpieces. Starfield got a lot of flack, and a lot of it was deserved, but I still enjoyed it more than most. Bethesda's most recently published game surprised pretty much everybody. The game is genuinely pretty damn good. The choice to have the game be first person seemed like a strange decision, and whilst I do think it brings some specific issues, for the most part I do think it worked. It really helps in exploration. The tombs and puzzles feel so much more immersive due to the first person perspective. The exploration is generally just brilliant in this game. There's a decent amount of side content, but it coincides so well with the main narrative that it doesn't feel like busy work. The side content is almost indistinguishable from the main content. Most of it could definitely have been involved in the main storyline. The hub areas are great, from the Vatican to the desert to Sukhothai. Each environment leaves a lasting impression on you, and they're all a joy to explore. There is zero side content in this game that feels like a waste of time. The linear sections are also great. The set pieces in this game are jaw-droppingly brilliant, my favourite parts of the game by far. Then there's the story, which is the real highlight of the game for me. It feels just like a classic Indiana Jones tale. The characters are brilliant, Gina brings so much life to this game, she was a fantastic addition, and Voss served as a wonderful villain, the perfect foil to Indy. Speaking of Indy, Troy Baker absolutely nailed his performance. Indy is just so brilliant in this game. I wasn't a fan of the combat though. First person melee isn't something I'm too keen on anyway, and I thought here it felt extremely clunky and desperate, which you could argue is the point, but I just wasn't feeling it. The shooting was god awful. I wasn't expecting Wolfenstein, but I just didn't like it. I tried to avoid shooting as much as possible, and the good thing is that is still a valid playstyle. Stealth is the main thing for me in this game. I think that's when the game excels the best. But overall, I didn't expect much from Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, but I left the experience pleasantly surprised. In second place, we have Doom Eternal, a game that didn't just live up to the high expectations set by its predecessor, but in my opinion, surpassed them. Developed by id, Doom Eternal took the chaotic, fast-paced demon-slaying formula of Doom and turned it into an even more polished, strategic and adrenaline-fueled experience. With its emphasis on speed, precision and resource management, Doom Eternal cemented itself as one of the best shooters of the decade, earning widespread acclaim for its inventive gameplay and sheer intensity. At its core, Doom Eternal is about one thing: making you feel unstoppable. Whilst I actually couldn't care less about the story, I do think it's nice that it's there, and I don't feel it's too overbearing to detract from the focus of the game. The biggest evolution lies in the combat mechanics. This is not a mindless shooter. Doom Eternal does demand precision, strategy and constant forward momentum. The game's combat is perfectly tuned to the ecosystems. Ammo is scarce, requiring you to chainsaw. Armour is earned by setting enemies ablaze with the flame belch, and health is restored by brutally ripping apart demons for glory kills. This constant need to balance resources and do a wide array of cool things makes you really experiment with everything you have at your disposal. Visually, Doom Eternal is a feast for the senses. The environments are more varied than in Doom 2016, and the art direction strikes a perfect balance between the grotesque and the epic, creating a world that feels simultaneously alien and familiar. And then there is the soundtrack, a thunderous mix of industrial metal and orchestral elements. The pulsing beats and shredding guitars perfectly complement the frenetic gameplay, making every fight feel like a momentous event. In the end, Doom Eternal isn't just a great game, it's a statement. It proves that single-player FPS games can still innovate and thrive in an era dominated by multiplayer and battle royale experiences, which were running rampant at the time of release. For fans of fast-paced action and finely tuned combat, Doom Eternal remains a must-play title and one of Bethesda's crowning achievements of the 2020s. At the top of the list we have Hi-Fi Rush, a surprise hit that took everybody by storm at the start of 2023. Released with little fanfare, this rhythm action game broke the mold for the studio, best known for dark moody titles like The Evil Within and the aforementioned Ghostwire Tokyo. With its vibrant art style, infectious soundtrack, and innovative gameplay, Hi-Fi Rush became an instant classic, proving that sometimes the biggest surprises come in the brightest packages. At its heart, Hi-Fi Rush is a celebration of music and movement. You take on the role of Shy, a wannabe rock star whose malfunctioning implant sinks his heart to the beat of the music. This rhythmic connection becomes the foundation of the game's combat and exploration, with everything in the world from enemy attacks to platforming challenges moving in time to the beat. It's a bold concept and they executed it absolutely flawlessly, with so much charm that it's hard not to fall in love. The gameplay is a rhythmic twist on character action games like Devil May Cry. Combat is fast paced and skill based, with you encouraged to attack, dodge and parry in time with the music. While attacking off beat won't penalise you too harshly, syncing your moves to the rhythm enhances your damage and style, rewarding anybody who chooses to embrace the game's musical foundation. Shy's arsenal of abilities keep combat fresh and exciting throughout the campaign. The rhythm-based nature of the game also extends beyond the combat. Platforming and exploration segments also revolve around the beat, with environmental hazards and moving platforms that are synced to the music. This rhythmic cohesion makes the entire world feel alive and reactive. Whether you're timing your jumps or using the beat to solve puzzles, Hi-Fi Rush constantly keeps you connected to the music. Of course, none of this would work if the soundtrack sucked, so it's a damn good job that the soundtrack doesn't suck. Visually, Hi-Fi Rush is just gorgeous. Every frame is bursting with colour and personality, from the neon-lit cityscapes to the expressive character animations. I haven't even mentioned the story yet. Shy is surrounded by a fantastic cast of characters who are difficult not to fall in love with. Every single cutscene is brimming with life, and you feel the deepening bond between each character. In the end, Hi-Fi Rush serves as a joyful celebration of music, creativity and fun. Its seamless integration of rhythm and action, combined with its stunning art style and infectious charm, make it a standout title in Bethesda's catalogue. Hi-Fi Rush is an absolute must-play and a very well-deserved top pick on this list. And there you have it, my ranking of every Bethesda game of the 2020s. While this decade has had its ups and downs for Bethesda, it's clear that they do continue to keep releasing games of different types, from the disappointing missteps of Redfall to the high-octane rhythm-based joy of Hi-Fi Rush. Each game has its own unique flavour, and their output remains one of the most interesting to follow in the industry. How would you rank these 7 games? Please let me know in the comments and I will judge you for it, but for now, that is all. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, it really does help, and remember, we're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers this year, so please subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you next week. Have a nice day, and goodbye.